Welcome to this explainer. You know, for a lot of us, the mere thought of public speaking feels like, well, a modern corporate terror, right? Sweaty palms, shaky knees, just staring out at a sea of expectant faces. But today, we're going to reframe that fear completely. Public speaking isn't just some stressful chore. It's actually an ancient, deeply biological quest for human connection. So let's dive into about 4,000 years of history to see exactly how we use words to shape the world around us.
So here's a massive question for you. How do you synchronize human minds? Seriously, think about it. Across millennia, the ultimate goal of rhetoric has always been, essentially, hacking the collective consciousness. Whether you're addressing an ancient city-state or pitching a brand new startup, the goal is exactly the same, syncing up the biological computer in your head with the ones in your audience's heads.
To trace this historical roadmap of human influence, we're going to move through 5 key phases. First, the global origins. Then, the classical revolution, the Enlightenment shift, the mass media era, and finally, the science of connection.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, the global origins, where we look at balancing eloquence and morality.
Way before the Greeks were debating in their grand amphitheaters, ancient civilizations independently figured out the immense power of organized speech. For example, if you look at ancient Egyptian texts like the Maxims of Ptahhotep from around 1900 BCE, the very first rule of great speaking wasn't actually speaking at all. It was something called wise silence. Literally, knowing exactly when to keep your mouth shut was seen as a tactical tool just as vital as eloquence itself. Pretty wild, right?
And meanwhile, other parts of the world were actively writing the rule books on engagement. Ancient India actually codified a rigorous science of debate. They broke it down into Vāda, which was honest truth-seeking, Jalpa, which was basically just wrangling to win, and Vitandā, which was aggressively tearing down your opponent. Over in China, you had this fascinating clash. Confucianism pushed for moral kindness in speech to create social harmony, but that went right up against the Mohist view, which demanded strict, plain utility over any kind of flowery language.
Moving forward, we hit part 2, the classical revolution, codifying persuasion. Now, in ancient Greece, public debate basically became an Olympic-level sport, but Plato was super suspicious of it. He argued that rhetoric was just a false art, nothing but trickery and flattery. Luckily, his student, Aristotle, stepped in to reconcile this. Aristotle took a much more pragmatic approach, defining rhetoric simply as the faculty of discovering persuasion. He didn't see it as a trick. He saw it as a neutral, absolutely essential tool for everyday influence. In fact, Aristotle essentially gave us the original masterclass in communication with his 3 modes of proof. First is ethos, which is your character and credibility. Basically, do they trust you? Then there's pathos, which is all about engaging emotions. Do they feel what you're feeling? And finally, logos, the logic. Does your rational argument actually make sense? Honestly, mastering this balance of credibility, emotion, and rational data is a framework that still applies to literally every presentation you'll ever give.
Later on, the Romans took these Greek theories and turned them into hyper-professional systems. Cicero came up with the 5 canons of rhetoric. You can think of this as a highly actionable checklist for your very next pitch. Step 1, invention, discover your arguments. Step 2, arrangement, organize them effectively. 3, style, choose your words carefully. 4, memory, get your concepts down cold. And 5, delivery, regulate how you physically present. It's just a perfect 2,000-year-old blueprint. So what happened next? Well, following the fall of Rome, there was a massive historical gap. Thankfully, Islamic scholars preserved these classical texts, because European rhetoric kind of fractured into super specialized arts, things like preaching and bureaucratic letter writing. And then, by the 16th century, we hit the Ramist schism, which actually stripped logic out of rhetoric entirely, reducing it to mere stylistic flair. And that shift was really cemented by the invention of the printing press, which basically moved human focus away from oral tradition and straight into written text.
Which brings us to part 3, the Enlightenment shift, focusing on psychology and human nature.
By the time the 18th century rolled around, the focus shifted from civic debate to the psychological science of the mind. Thinkers like George Campbell realized that speaking actually has to address the entire human brain. He argued that true persuasion has to engage our understanding to inform us, our imagination to please us, our passions to move us, and our will to actually persuade us. He called this specific spark vivacity. At the same time, folks like Hugh Blair focused on taste, linking the actual beauty of speech directly to human sensibility and moral improvement.
And you can really see this deep psychological understanding fueling the great 19th century orators. Take the fight against slavery in America. You had Frederick Douglass, who commanded stages with this roaring baritone voice and an incredibly romantic persona. But then conversely, you have Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was cautious, he stood perfectly still, and actually had a surprisingly clear, high-pitched voice. These are two vastly different physical deliveries, right? Yet both of them successfully captured the passions of their audiences and quite literally altered the course of democracy.
All right, let's jump into part 4, the mass media era, exploring radio and democratization.
Once technology started projecting the human voice into millions of living rooms, speaking styles had to completely adapt. 120, that is the exact number of words per minute President Franklin Roosevelt spoke during his famous fireside chats. By deliberately slowing down his pace, he engineered what you might call an imagined community. He was creating this very subtle, intimate atmosphere, making it feel like he was speaking directly to citizens right in their own homes. This era also totally democratized speaking skills. In 1912, Dale Carnegie came along and basically replaced all those abstract ancient theories with hands-on experiential training for everyday business folks. And then, by 1924, Toastmasters launched their model of iterative mass practice. Suddenly, the art of persuasion wasn't just for politicians or philosophers anymore. Anyone could learn it to help tackle their daily challenges.
Which leads us to our final stop, part 5, the science of connection, where biology meets digital innovation.
Okay, remember that question we asked at the very beginning? How do you synchronize human minds? Well, modern neuroscience finally has the literal answer for us, and it's called neural coupling. Research shows that when you tell a really compelling story, the listener's brain activity begins to identically mirror your own brain activity. I mean, think about that. Synchronizing minds is not just a poetic metaphor, it is a totally measurable biological reality.
When you craft a perfectly structured story, you are essentially activating a precise neurochemical checklist. First, a strong narrative arc introduces tension, and that triggers cortisol, which heightens our focus. Next, as you build empathy, the brain releases oxytocin, that's the trust hormone. And finally, a satisfying conclusion releases dopamine, which enhances memory and reward. You are, quite literally, conducting a chemical symphony right inside your audience's heads. How cool is that?
To put that power into perspective, let's look at this number, 82%. Studies have shown that measuring oxytocin levels can actually predict pro-social behavior in an audience with an astonishing 82% accuracy. If your story genuinely triggers empathy, your audience will reliably take positive action. Thousands of years ago, Aristotle called it pathos. Today, we just call it oxytocin.
So how do we master this biological influence today? We're actually marrying the ancient Roman canon of delivery with cutting-edge digital sensors. Modern AI-enhanced VR platforms now use eye-tracking heat maps to check audience focus, they analyze your real-time vocal dynamics, and they even monitor physiological stress, like your heart rate while you're speaking.
And the crazy part? This digital feedback actually works. Look at the data. Studies show that practicing an AI-enhanced VR can drop the percentage of anxious speakers from 65% down to just 20% in a single week. By combining self-guided practice with incredibly precise data, we are actively curing the very same public speaking anxiety that has plagued humans since ancient Athens.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought. As AI tracks our eyes and our heart rates to perfect our speech, what is the actual future of human connection? Well, all the data and history seem to point to one enduring truth. While our technology has evolved from clay tablets all the way to VR headsets, the perfect speaker remains exactly what they were 4,000 years ago, a delicate, beautiful synthesis of deep moral character and rigorous technical mastery. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this completely changes how you view your next big presentation.